Welcome back to the Military Times Reporters Roundtable, where we bring you the inside stories behind the week's biggest headlines. I'm Leo Shane, Capitol Hill Bureau Chief for Military Times, and with me again are Megan Myers, our Pentagon Bureau Chief, and Howard Altman, our Managing Editor. Good to see both of you again. The last remaining U.S. forces in Afghanistan left the country last month, but Pentagon leaders are still facing a lot of questions about the messy withdrawal and the long-term security impact of that move. Next Tuesday, both Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley will testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee in public for the first time since that departure. And they're expected to face a lot of tough questionings about what happened and what's still left to find out. Megan, one of the biggest issues the senators plan to bring up is concerns about an airstrike that military officials had conducted right around the end of the evacuation. Pentagon initially said that had killed several ISIS fighters who were planning to attack U.S. military forces. Then they backtracked a few days ago and said it actually killed 10 civilians. What do we know about that right now, and what does all of this mean?
What we know right now is the investigation was released a few days ago, and there will be an Air Force Inspector General who will do sort of an investigation of the investigation to figure out what went wrong and whether any discipline should be handed down. But essentially, the strike appears to have been a case, quite frankly, of mistaken identity. Intelligence reports were saying look out for a white Corolla. They spotted a white Toyota Corolla outside of an ISIS compound, followed it for the rest of the day, and dropped a bomb on it, around 5 p.m. And it turns out that Corolla didn't belong to an ISIS fighter. It belonged to a non-governmental organization aid worker.
It's a real tragedy. Howard, part of the President Biden's withdrawal strategy here and his explanation for why it was safe to start bringing U.S. troops out now was that U.S. forces would be able to strike terrorist groups from far away, still be able to provide security even if they weren't physically in that area. Does this tragedy undermine that?
Well, there was a recent press conference where CENTCOM Commander Frank McKenzie was quick to point out that these over-the-horizon attacks can still take place. He was quick to point out this was an imminent threat response, and that the kind of activities that take place for taking out a leader of some terrorist organization where you establish a pattern of life over a course of time will still be able to continue. Don't forget that Monday there was a drone strike on an Al-Qaeda leader in Syria that CENTCOM said. There's some complicating factors, though. The distance from any base now that we're not in Afghanistan, and another issue that hasn't really been explored as much as it probably should be is this is sovereign airspace that the Taliban controls with their government. Will they allow U.S. aviation assets to enter that airspace? That remains to be seen, and also remains to be seen what, if any, cooperation the Chinese or Russians give to the Taliban in terms of anti-aircraft systems. So there's still a lot of questions that remain to be answered about that.
Yeah, but a lot of those are technical issues. I mean, I think what we're going to hear next week from lawmakers is really kind of the moral questions here. I mean, if we don't physically have folks on the ground, if we're not collecting intelligence the same way, how confident can we be in these strikes? And given this misstep, given this tragedy, can they have confidence that it's going to work in this way? Also, still a lot of lingering questions from senators about how many Americans and Afghan allies were left behind in the evacuation. State Department officials said that more than 130,000 individuals were taken out of the country over the course of about 4 or 5 weeks. But a few hundred American citizens still are there. An unknown number of Afghan allies are still there. This is hostile Taliban territory now. Howard, what's the latest on this?
Well, there are a number of different efforts underway to get U.S. citizens as well as Afghan allies out. Right now, it's a State Department managed operation. One of the big things they have to do is convince third-party countries to take these flights out of, right now, Mazar-e-Sharif. The Taliban want to be recognized by the State Department, so there's negotiations going back and forth. But there's still, every day I get messages from Afghanistan, help me, help me. There are efforts underway that I really can't talk about this moment to help some of those folks. As far as the military, it's mostly a lift operation after they got out of the country. So it's still a very dangerous situation for the folks, American citizens, and those folks who helped us out.
Yeah, some DoD officials just briefed a few days ago, the senators and some congressmen about about the latest on this. But one of the unifying themes I've been hearing is that since this is a State Department operation now, the military just doesn't have the answers or doesn't have the authority to work on this. So Megan, what's the level of frustration down there? I mean, this is not the Pentagon's responsibility, but they still seem to be on the hot seat with a lot of this.
Well, yeah, that becomes the issue, is that for so many things, especially at the end of, our time in Afghanistan, everyone was looking for the Defense Department for what they were going to do about it. And they were saying, these are White House decisions to make, these are State Department decisions to make. So for now, like Howard said, lift, putting people on helicopters, putting people on planes, that's something the Defense Department can do. And they can also, lend their help essentially to organizing these missions for any sort of situational awareness about what's going on and connections, who to talk to about things. But as for the physical, movement and the, approval of people, that is not up to them.
Well, one other topic that I know you and I are going to be following next week is these allegations against General Milley that were outlined in a new book about the final days of the Trump presidency. That account was written by journalists Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, and it claims that Milley warned senior military officials that Trump was unstable and that they needed to consult with him, Milley, on any major military actions or any major military decisions. They also say in the book that Milley had behind-the-scenes phone calls with Chinese military leaders to assure them the U.S. wasn't planning any attacks or any military actions. What's been the reaction down the Pentagon at this, Megan?
So, the Office of the Secretary of Defense level, they've been a little bit hands-off with it, because, Milley speaks for himself. He has a separate office, but also because this happened before anybody who's running the Pentagon now was in office. So they don't have a lot of visibility about how it went down. The way Milley's camp has handled it is by explaining, much like he did in those meetings, explaining how these meetings work, who knows about them, who's on the call, and trying to kind of walk back this narrative that has emerged that he was undermining, the president, or he was usurping any sort of chain of command authority by calling these meetings.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of turmoil between the Joint Chiefs Chairman and Trump at the end. Obviously, a lot of turmoil within the Trump administration on a lot of levels. Howard, at least 30 members of Congress, all Republicans, have called for Milley to resign over this. Is there a chance that this costs him his job?
No, not at all. The Biden administration, Biden's not going to call for Milley to resign. Secretary of Defense Austin has also supported Milley. I don't see any chance of him being fired. At some point, he's going to retire. He's been there for a little bit under two administrations. So that, if anything happens, he may just decide to retire. But I don't believe that this is going to get him fired.
Well, he will be facing a lot of questions on this at the hearing. He's even deferred some of the things, saying he looks forward to talking about it at the hearing. So we'll be interested to see just how some of those Republicans react if he gives those same calm explanations, whether they take them or whether they don't. So, all right, look, one other item before we get going, a little bit on the lighter side. This week, the Space Force revealed a new prototype service dress uniform for their Guardians. Military community seems pretty split of whether they look more like Star Trek uniforms or Battlestar Galactica uniforms. Megan, do you think they can work some more Stormtrooper into this to balance everything out on the sci-fi fandom scale?
I think they need to walk some of that back a little bit. And honestly, the thing that has upset me the most about the uniforms is how untailored the pants are. They're awfully swishy, very parachutey. So maybe if they could just work on tightening the uniform up a little bit, it might not look so silly.
Howard, as our standard fashionista, I know you have strong opinions on the tailoring of the pants too, but do you think there's things they should prepare this uniform for deep space exploration and deep space travel that they won't be doing?
Well, the only good thing is that in space, you cannot hear people scream about buttons. And as Megan pointed out, the tailoring's pretty bad. You think with the budget they had, they could have worked on that. You get better fitting suits off the rack at Walmart. So that's a real problem.
Well, I'm looking forward to the congressional investigations into who put together the poor uniforms and how to improve them. That's all we have time for today. Thanks so much for you two for sharing your insight. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in. You can follow all of our coverage on these issues in coming weeks at militarytimes.com. We'll see you next time.